These are your April announcements. As a reminder, members and guests, signs are posted near the main entrance that eating inside the sanctuary at any time is prohibited. Please remember that we want to keep the space clean to enhance our spiritual experiences. Are you a Mount Pleasant member and not on band? Scan the QR code with your phone's QR app to download the band app and join the Mount Pleasant group. Call 317-627-4326 if you have questions. On third Sundays at our 10:30 service, new members are baptized and babies are dedicated in the name of our Lord. Contact Sister Dana Keats at 317-291-6655 to schedule your sacred event. Versatile, resourceful Brianna Fitz, owner of Beaded by Bree and Be There Events, loves creating individually designed waist beads and using her established connections to provide the best party planning service for her clients. Select Brianna to enhance your waist and next event. Direct message Brianna at Bree with the Beads on Instagram or by email at briannafitz94@gmail.com. On Wednesday, April 24th, noon Bible study will be in person. The 7 p.m. session will be available on band. Attention all Mount Pleasant women ages 18 and older. The next Sisters Women's Ministry Group meeting will be on Saturday, April 27th from 1 to 2:30 p.m. The agenda will consist of discussing our survey responses from the launch party and developing teams for more meaningful ministry experiences. Shred those old documents on Saturday, April 27th from 10 a.m. to 12 noon. The Sisterhood Ministry is hosting a shredded event here at Mount Pleasant. At just $5 a box, tell your family, friends, and neighbors too.
Hello, Mount Pleasant Church family. Yaya Week is right around the corner, and we want you to get your youth and young adults involved in one of the activities that we have planned for Yaya Week. You can find Monday through Wednesday on our flyer and get those details. Thursday and Friday, we have planned our first youth and young adult revival. You will get a chance momentarily to hear from our revivalists and hear how excited they are on what God can do at our youth and young adult revival. On that Saturday, we're in with a big carnival. We're going to have rides. We're going to have the police horses. We're going to have a fire truck. We're going to have food, popcorn, cotton candy. It's going to be an event to remember. I hope to see you there.
Peace and blessings, family and friends over at Mount Pleasant. It's Pastor P here from Eastern Star Church, and I am looking forward to joining you all for your first youth and young adult revival there at Mount Pleasant on May 3rd. I'm sure it's going to be a great time in the Lord, and I cannot wait to see you there.
What's up, friends and family? This is Pastor Chelsea, and I'm so honored to be one of the speakers at Mount Pleasant's Youth and Young Adult Revival. I believe that something special happens when we all come together on one accord. So please consider this your personal invitation from me. I know that there is still a remnant that is hungry and thirsty for the things of God. We about kingdom business this year. Grace and peace. I can't wait to see you.
Now follow Pastor Johnson on social media's Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at PST Michael J. Follow Mount Pleasant on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Mount Pleasant Indy. That's all for your April announcements.
Welcome. I'm Michael Johnson, the senior pastor of the Mount Pleasant Church, located here in the beautiful city of Indianapolis, Indiana. And I want to welcome you to our online service. I've been praying for you. And my prayer for you today is that you would connect with God through the worship and the word. At the end of this service, I'm going to share with you some ways in which you can respond to the message. But until then, I want you to open your heart to this experience, and I want you to get ready for a dynamic time in worship. I'll see you soon. Hey, I want to just take a moment now and share with you ways in which you can support this ministry, the Mount Pleasant Church, financially. On your screen right now, there are several ways in which you can share a gift with our church. You can download the CVLI app, and you can search for the Mount Pleasant Missionary Baptist Church page, or like the page and give that way through CVLI. You can also go to mountpleasantindy.org/give, and you can give through PayPal, or you can simply put a check in the mail. Our physical location is 5111 West 62nd Street, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46268. And let me take a moment right now and say thank you to all of our supporters and all of you who give to support this ministry. It is because of you that we're able to spread the gospel far and wide. Thank you.
Well, this song right here is for you. It goes like this. All we want is you. Take over. Take over. Until we are consumed by nothing else but you. Come on. All we want is take you. Over. Take over. Because I keep messing it up. Take over. Till we are consumed. Till we are consumed by nothing. By nothing else. Say all we want. All we want. You can take over. Take over. Because I keep choosing the wrong stuff. Take over. Till we are consumed. Till we are consumed by nothing. By nothing. Nothing else. Say all we want. All we want. You can take over. Take over. You can take over. Take over. Till we are consumed. Till we are consumed by nothing. By nothing. Stay right there. Say all we want, all we want. This is for the mature Christian. You can take over. Take over my money. Take over this marriage. Take over that doctor's appointment until we are by nothing, nothing else but you. Say, Lord, take my mind. 'Cause sometimes my mind drifts off. Take my heart. Take my will. God, I'll give it all to you. I'll give it all. I just want more of you. I really mean it from my heart. That's all I want. All we want is more of you. Lord have mercy. And all we want is you. You can take over. Just take over. Until we are consumed by nothing. Nothing else but you. Say, Lord, take my mind. Lord, come on. Lord, take my mind. 'Cause sometimes my mind is not on the right stuff. Take my heart. Take against you. Take my will so I won't keep making the wrong mistakes. I give it all to you. I give it all. I want more. I just want more of you. That's all we want. That's all we want. If I have more of you, everything will work itself out. Stay right there. Watch me. Oh, and Lord, take over. Take over. That's a sincere prayer. Lord, take over. 'Cause you can win the game for me. Take over. One note. Lord, take over. You can have all of me right now. Take over. I keep messing it up anyway. I keep messing it up anyway. You can have all of me right now, right now, right now. Say, Lord, take over. Take this marriage right now. Take over, take over. Say, Lord, take these finances from me. You can have it all right now. I just want you, Jesus. Lord, take over. You can have it right now. You can have it right now. Take my business. Take my family. Take my children. You can have it. You can have all of me right now. Take over. One more. Lord, I'm giving it to you right now. It's too heavy for me to carry anyway. I'm giving it to you right now. It's too heavy for me. Take over. Take over right now. Take over. Take over. 'Cause all we want is you. Take over. Take over. Until we are consumed by nothing right here. Nothing else but you. Won't you take a minute and submit yourself to God? Take a minute and submit yourself to God right now. Say, God.
I want to call your attention to 1 Samuel chapter 5. 1 Samuel chapter 5, verses 1 through verse 12. That makes up the whole chapter. It's a very short chapter. 1 Samuel chapter 5, verse 1 through verse number 12. If you have not been with me in the last couple of weeks, we've been looking at 1 Samuel chapter 4 through chapter 7, verse number 2, and paying attention particularly to this saga about the Ark of the Covenant. And so if you missed those messages, I would encourage you to search them out on social media and to catch up to where we are today. But we're going to pick up with this narrative in 1 Samuel chapter 5, verses 1 through verse number 12. I'm reading this from the New International Version, and it reads, "After the Philistines had captured the Ark of God, they took it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. Then they carried the ark into Dagon's temple and set it beside Dagon. When the people of Ashdod rose early the next day, there was Dagon fallen on his face on the ground before the ark of the Lord. They took Dagon and put him back in his place. But the following morning when they rose, there was Dagon fallen on his face on the ground before the ark of the Lord. His head and hands had been broken off and were lying on the threshold. Only his body remained. That is why to this day neither the priests of Dagon nor any others who enter Dagon's temple at Ashdod step on the threshold. The Lord's hand was heavy on the people of Ashdod and its vicinity. He brought devastation on them and afflicted them with tumors. When the people of Ashdod saw what was happening, they said, "The ark of the God of Israel must not stay here with us, because his hand is heavy on us and on Dagon our God." So they called together all the rulers of the Philistines and asked them, "What shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel?" They answered, "Have the ark of the God of Israel moved to Gath." So they moved the ark of the God of Israel. But after they had moved it, the Lord's hand was against that city, throwing it into a great panic. He afflicted the people of the city, both young and old, with an outbreak of tumors. So they sent the ark of God to Ekron. As the ark of God was entering Ekron, the people of Ekron cried out, "They have brought the ark of the God of Israel around to us to kill us and our people." So they called together all the rulers of the Philistines and said, "Send the ark of the God of Israel away. Let it go back to its own place, or it will kill us and our people." For death had filled the city with panic. God's hand was very heavy on it. Those who did not die were afflicted with tumors, and the outcry of the city went up to heaven. Amen. You can be seated in the presence of the Lord. For the moments we have to share, I want to preach about the heavy hand of God. The heavy hand of God. Imagine a father of a 5-year-old boy, and they are arm wrestling. 20 occasions, the father and his son engage in an arm wrestling match. On 17 of those occasions, the first 17 occasions, the boy pins his father's arm to the table. Now, of course, the father lets him pin his arm to the table. And after those 17 consecutive wins, the boy begins to celebrate. His confidence grows. He begins to feel invincible, like he is stronger than his father. He even begins to tease his father. Well, of course, dad can't let that slide. So in the last 3 matches between the father and his son, he adds just a little bit of strength to his arm and to his hand, and he pins his sons 3 times in a row to the table to let his son know and to remind his son that as his father, he still has the upper hand. My brothers and sisters, I believe that there are a lot of people in the world today that act like that little boy because they are able to get away with certain things, because they are able to succeed with certain endeavors. They become lifted up in themselves. They become prideful and arrogant and even a bit brash and start flexing. And it's at that moment that God reveals that he has and has always had the upper hand. In 1 Samuel chapter 5, it refers to God's heavy hand 3 times. In verse number 6, in verse number 7, and again in verse number 11. The heavy hand of God, my brothers and sisters, refers to the judgment of God. So that when you see the heavy hand of God in the Bible, it is a reference to the judgment of God. And God reveals his heavy hand to the Philistines because the Philistines, they had defeated the Israelites in battle twice in chapter 4. There were a total of 34,000 soldiers who had been killed in the battle against the Philistines of Israelites. They had been killed. And so God reveals his heavy hand to them. Furthermore, the priests, Hophni and Phinehas, have also been killed, and the ark of God has been captured. Now, we've talked about in previous messages what the Ark of God is. The Ark of God was a box, of course, and it was overlaid with gold, and on top of that box were two cherubim. These are angel-like creatures that were wings outspread over the box. And this box came to represent and symbolize the presence of God. God told Moses when he ordered Moses to make the Ark of the Covenant that whenever he would meet with his people, he would meet with them between that empty space between the two cherubims. And it came to be known as the presence of God, or symbolized the presence of God. But the problem with the Ark of the Covenant is that the Israelites, they started trying to use the Ark of the Covenant like a lucky charm. When they lost the first battle against the Philistines, they went and sent for the Ark of the Covenant, and they brought it into the camp thinking that somehow, just because they have the Ark of the Covenant, God was with them and they were going to win the battle. Just like some of us think because we wear a cross around our neck, or we walk around with a Bible that we never read, that just because we got it with us, that somehow God is going to be with us as well. But you can have the Bible, you can have the cross, you can have the church outfit, you can have the tailor-made suit, and still not have God. And they lost the battle. The ark had been captured. The Philistines, they marched back from the battle at Ebenezer, and they're probably feeling very victorious because they've captured the ark. And as they're coming back from the battle and thinking that they're victorious, they experienced the heavy hand of God. And my brothers and sisters, the way God revealed his heavy hand to the Philistines should be a cautionary tale to every one of us today, that if we act like these Philistines, God will reveal his heavy hand against us. First thing we notice in this text, my brothers and sisters, is that the Philistines, they tried to control God. I want you to keep in mind, please view this from the perspective of the Philistines. Even though you and I sitting here today, we know that the Ark of God is not equal to God. It was just a symbol of God's presence. The Philistines, they saw the Ark of God equal to being the Israel's God. So in their minds, the text says in verse number 1, after the Philistines had captured the Ark of God, they took it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. Now, I don't want you to miss here something that's very important. If you're reading from the New International Version, the word captured here means that they took it in their hands. What they believe to be Israel's God, they have captured, which means they took hold of it with their hands. I'll say it one more time. They believed that they had Israel's God in their hands. They captured it and they took it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. The Philistines, again, they equated the ark with Israel's God. Therefore, to them to take possession of the ark, it was to have taken possession of Israel's God. And mistake number one, my brothers and sisters, is thinking that we can own God when in reality we should all seek to be owned by God. We all here should seek to be owned by God. We should seek to be God's property. And if you are saved in here today, if you are a believer, then the good news is you are possessed by God. And you ought to be happy and rejoice in the fact that you have been possessed and you belong to God. You should not want a God that you can possess. You should want a God who can possess you. You should not want a God that has to be in your hands. You should want a God that you can be in his hands. 1 Corinthians chapter 6 says that you and I have been bought with a price. and we don't belong to ourselves. And then in Revelation chapter 5, John tells us what the purchasing price for you and I was, and it was the blood of Christ. That God paid for you and I with the blood of his only begotten Son. My brothers and sisters, you and I ought to rejoice here today that we belong to God, that we are his possessions. 1 Peter 2:9 says, but you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation. Here it is, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Do you want to know why God made you his possession? So he can get glory out of your life, so he can get praise out of your life. And if you're sitting in here today and you are saved, but you're not giving God any praise, then you're not living up to the purpose for which God has created you in the first place. For he saved you not to sit there like a bump on a log, but he saved you, and he did all of these good things in your life so that when you showed up on church this Sunday morning, you would enter his gates with thanksgiving and you would enter into his courts with praise. But there's some of y'all that's sitting there, you've been in church for a whole hour and you ain't opened your mouth yet. You've been sitting here for a whole hour and you ain't told God thank you yet. You've been looking at me for a whole hour and you haven't lifted your hands yet. But my brothers and sisters, if you know that you serve the one true and living God, can you just take 10 seconds right now and give God a praise in here? They thought that they could control God. Wait a minute. They didn't just try to take possession of what they thought was God, but then they tried to position God where they wanted God to be in their community. I ain't making it up, it's right here in the text. Because when you look at the first part of verse number 2, it says, then they carried the ark into Dagon's temple. That's the place where they put God, or what they thought was God, in their community. Because they thought that not only could they take possession of God, but they had the control to put God where they wanted God to be in their community. That I want God in a temple. That's where I want him. I want God in this place in my community and in my life. So whenever I want to see God, I come to the temple. And when I don't want nothing to do with God, I leave him back at the temple. Y'all gonna feel me in just a minute. The problem for them that brought the heavy hand of God was for them thinking that they could literally put God where they wanted God to be in their community and where they wanted God to be in their life. And if you're not careful, when you start thinking you can put God where you want God to be in your life, like, God, I want you in this part of my life, but I don't want you in that part of my life. I don't mind you showing up at the temple, but please don't show up at my job or in my workplace or come in my home, because I just want to come visit you at the temple, but then when I leave the temple, I want to leave you back at the temple. And I want y'all to be careful, because some of y'all came to church today to visit God. And you plan on leaving God when you leave here today. But here's the problem. God doesn't live in temples. God is omnipresent. Therefore, if you came here today thinking you were coming to see God, God was back at your house before you left. And God was with you in the car when you drove here. And God met you when you walked through the door, and you walked through the door. And when you leave here, God gonna be with you when you walk out of the door. And he gonna be with you when you get in your car. And he gonna be there when you get back to your house. And when you go to sleep and wake up in the morning and you show up at the workplace, I wanna know, do I have anybody here that know God will be with you right there as well? Because God God does not live in temples. And if you are a believer in here today, you should have brought God with you when you came to church, because he ought to be living inside of you. And they thought, hey, we can put God in the temple and that's where God will be. And watch this, my brothers and sisters, they thought they could keep God where they wanted God to be. But even the psalmist tells us in Psalm 139, where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, even there you will be. If I take the wings of the morning and settle on the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me and your right hand shall guide me. Because there's no place you and I can go where we can get away from God. Now, while that might seem judgmental on one hand, it's also good news on the other hand, because even when you stray from the church and you stray from God, I want you to know that you haven't gone so far away from God that God cannot get to you, that God cannot reach you right where you are. Am I the only one in here that have ever strayed away from the church or strayed away from God in my heart? But no matter how far I went from God, wherever I landed, God was right there waiting on me to bring me back to himself. My brothers and sisters, God is everywhere. Their mistake was that they thought they could put God in a particular place and leave God there. Another mistake they made is that they thought not only could they possess God and position God, but they thought they could pair God with another God. It's in the text, verse number 2. Then they carried the ark into Dagon's temple and set it beside Dagon. Now, you need to understand, my brothers and sisters, that the location of this Ark of the Covenant is important, because it emphasizes the fact that they put the Ark of the Covenant, which represents God's presence, they put it in Dagon's temple. They didn't give the Ark its own temple. That's going to come later when Solomon builds a temple for the ark. But instead, they took what represented the presence of God and they put it in Dagon's temple, which showed you the value that they had for God. That God, you don't have a house, but we're going to let you sleep on our couch. And you can come on in Dagon's temple. Now, y'all, when I go to somebody's house, I am keenly aware it's not my house. When I go to somebody's house, I got to respect their rules. I got to do things their way. So if I come to your house and your rule is I got to take my shoes off at the door, then when I get to the door of your house, I got to take my shoes off. And if you put me in a certain room and you want me to stay in that room, then I can't get up and walk all over your house. And if you want me to sit on a particular seat in your room, then that's the seat that I have to sit on, because it's your house and I got to follow your rules. And that's essentially what the Philistines were doing to Almighty God. They put the Ark of the Covenant in Dagon's temple, because watch this, they want to be associated with God, but they want that God, they want Israel's God to be submitted to their false God. Let me make it plain. I told y'all in one of my sermons that you can make anything a God. And one of the biggest gods we have in the New Testament is money. We make money a god. And some people, they have made money their God, but they still want to be associated with Yahweh, the great I am, the eternal God. So they have made the true God subordinate to their false god of money. And you want to know what that produced? That prosperity gospel that everybody's preaching, that everybody's trying to tell you that God wants you to be healthy and have all this money and be rich. No, that's your false God trying to subordinate the one true and living God and make him subject to you. Because God never promised everybody that you're going to have $1 million or you're going to have become a billion. God never promised that, but he did promise, I will supply all of your needs according to my riches and glory. God never promised that he gonna heal everybody of every sickness you ever have in your life. But he did say, I'll never leave you, nor would I ever forsake you. But y'all, when people try to take the real God and subject them to their false God, then this is what you get. They want God, but they just want him to be under the control of their false God. Not only that, but that's the location. Look at the level. They put the Ark of the Covenant beside Dagon. Both Jewish and Christian readers would quickly recognize that this placement of the Ark of the Covenant as a symbol of God's presence violates the first commandment. For God said, you shall have no other gods before or beside me. By putting the Ark of the Covenant or aligning the Ark of the Covenant with with Dagon, they were simply trying to say that Israel's God is comparable in power to their God in their eyes. In other words, their God, Dagon, he was the god of grain. And he was the god of weather. So they believed Dagon controlled the farming and the agriculture and gave them their resources. They believed Dagon was also the one that made storms happen and weather happen. So they believed that was Dagon's power. And by putting the Ark of the Covenant beside Dagon, they were saying, just as Dagon has some power, the Ark of the Covenant, or Israel's God, has some power. That they're both comparable in terms of the amount of power that they have. Our God has some power because they have multiple gods. They have a God for grain, a God for weather, a God for prosperity. They got a God for healing. They got a God for war. And they said all these gods got some power. So I'm going to take Israel's God and put him beside Dagon because Dagon has some power and Israel's God has some power. But the problem is that God doesn't have some power. God has all power. And when you have God in your life, you don't need no other God. You don't need a God to pay your bills. You don't need a God that's going to heal you. You don't need a God that's going to give you a good day. You don't need a God that'll raise your kids. You don't need another God that'll do this, because when you got the one true and living God, you have the God who has all power. That one God can pay your bills, can raise your kids, can put food on your table, can heal your body. I wish I had somebody in here that knows that when you got Yahweh, you got the one God that is all powerful. And they tried to put God on the level of their God. So what does God do? They go to sleep. They wake up the next day. When they wake up the next day and they come into the temple, they find Dagon. I believe God got a sense of humor. They find Dagon, this statue of their God, face down before the Ark of the Covenant. Face down, that is the position of worship. That's prostrate. That Dagon has prostrated himself before the God of Israel. That he is on his face worshiping, because even Dagon got enough sense to recognize that I am in the presence of Almighty God, and the only thing you ought to do when you come into the presence of God is fall on your face and give God some worship. And if that doesn't convict some of y'all that's been sitting up in here looking at me, that a false God that don't even exist know how to give worship to God, and here you are, won't lift a hand, won't fall on your face, won't honor God. Y'all, when you come into God's presence, you ought to worship him. And you know something? They woke up and they saw that their God had fallen down before the Ark of the Covenant. Now, any kind of sense would tell you that if what I have idolized is worshiping the Lord, then maybe I should fall down and worship the Lord as well. But notice this. Here's the problem. Their God is helpless. Because when their God falls face down before the ark of the Lord, their God doesn't have the power or the strength to pick himself up. Their God doesn't have the power or the strength to put himself back in the right place. So the people who worship this false god, they got to bend down and they got to pick their God up. Then they got to lift their God to the right place that he belongs. And y'all, I made up my mind that I don't want a God that when he falls, I got to pick him up. I want a God that when I fall can pick me up. And I don't want a God that I got to lift up. I want a God that can lift me up. Do I have anybody in here that recognizes the God you serve is a God that can help you? They gotta bend down and pick up their God and put them back in place. They go home, go to sleep. All is well. Get up the next day, come back to the temple. There's Dagon again, on his face before the ark of the Lord. Watch this. This time, his head is broken off. His hand is broken off. Now, there's two important things you need to know about his head and hands being broken off. First is that these are symbols of the faculty of this God. The head being broken off is a symbol of the faculty of the leadership of this God, because leadership comes from the head. That's where leadership comes from. And by the head being broken off, what God is trying to let the Philistines know is that your God cannot lead you. In the head, where the brain and the mind is, your God cannot think, your God cannot reason, your God cannot plan. In the head is not just the mind, but in the head are the eyes. Your God cannot see. Your God has no vision. Your God has no direction. In the head is your God cannot speak. Your God cannot talk. In the head are the ears. Your God cannot hear. Your God cannot